Good morning, Broncos fans, and welcome to Legends of Mile High. I am your host, Thomas Hall, and today we're going to talk a little bit about the Broncos' upcoming offseason. It's season's over, and they've got to make some plans for the future. And what those future plans entail is going to be difficult based on their impending free agents, their lack of draft capital, and their salary cap situation. So we're going to dive into that. But before we really do dive into that, I just want to say yesterday was the 37th anniversary of the drive. The moment John Elway went from Broncos quarterback to Broncos legend. So reminisce a little bit about the Broncos and the drive back in those early years of John Elway. I remember myself, I was a football fan back in the late 70s as a kid, or like starting to come into the 80s. I started liking the Broncos, and I'll tell you, it was the drive that really solidified my Broncos fandom. I went from liking them to loving the Broncos, and just man, I still get chills when I watch the replay of that drive because it was amazing. I was watching it on a TV with, it wasn't HD for sure. It was a snowy TV with a TV antenna, not very good reception, but it was still amazing to watch. And if you were there able to see it live, or you were able to see it on TV when it happened, you knew you were witnessing greatness. So here's to the drive. All right, let me just get Facebook pulled up here. I think having a little trouble getting that to come through and finding it. So I don't know why. I don't know why Facebook is on such a delay, but we'll keep trying here. And I'm going to say good morning to some of the folks in the chat. Michael Ronquillo, thank you for being here. Saying good morning, Thomas, on Legends of Mile High, coming in from Facebook. And thank you always for the support that you provide for this show and Mile High Huddle in general. So thank you so much. And we also have David Yunkin coming in here early saying, good morning, Thomas. Everyone is saying we all have these holes that we need to fill. So they want to trade Patrick Surtain too and other players. I guess they just want to create more holes to fill. Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. There are a lot of holes to fill. And we're going to walk through a little bit of those holes. But as I talked about on Mile High Insiders on Wednesday, I just don't see why you would get rid of the a known quantity in Patrick Surtain. I mean, he is the best cornerback in the league. He's still young. I know he's your only trade piece, really, if you want to move up dramatically. He's the only player that you have that you're going to get massive draft capital before. But as I've said before, the draft is not a perfect science. You watch, they'll probably draft maybe 5, 6 quarterbacks, 2, 3 of them maybe pan out. I mean, you're taking a known quantity and you're getting rid of it for a potential of something else. And I know the Broncos are desperate for a quarterback. I know you've got to do something, but it's hard to trade away an impact player like Patrick Surtain for a hope that you can get somebody else come in that's going to help this franchise. You got to keep your young players. You got to keep those young players that you drafted that are really good to form the nucleus of this team. And that's just the way it is. So I'm with you, David. I think there's going to be a lot more holes than we think when this season comes around, and they're going to be relying on rookies, last year's rookies, young players. They're going to be forced to do it. So we'll jump into that. I'm going to grab Jeremy Sean here saying, morning, Thomas. I think we're making too much of the cap situation. We have contracts that we can shed, and if we draft a QB that works out, we should be in good shape. Yeah, I mean, I have to disagree a little bit with you, Jeremy, because from my perspective, the cap situation is pretty bleak. I mean, you obviously the Broncos are going to move stuff around. They have the cash, which is good, but there's still salary cap issues. Russell Wilson's going to probably be 37-ish million against the cap this year because they're not going to take that whole cap hit up front. It's going to put you put the team around 60 million over the cap. That's a lot. You can only restructure so much. And the problem with restructuring and pushing that cap hit down the road is that then you're going to have to come up with it down the road as well. So I think they're going to do a lot of manipulation of the cap, but I also think they're going to have to try and trade a few players and release a few players in order to actually get under the cap. And there's going to be a combination of many things. And we haven't even talked about the pending unrestricted free agents, the starters that are going to come up as well. So that's it looks bleak from my perspective at this point. But again, Jeremy, thanks for being here. As always, I appreciate your discussion and everything else that you bring to this chat. So thank you so much. Keith Brugman's here. Cheers to the drive. Yes, thank you, Keith. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming in from Facebook. It's nice to reminisce about the days when the Broncos were consistently good instead of consistently bad. And I mean, I remember when 8 wins was not good enough. It was a disaster, so to speak, and anyone that thinks that an 8-9 season was a success, I'm sorry. I mean, Pat Bowlen would be rolling over in his grave to hide his shame from fans thinking that 8-9 was a good season. So I'm waiting for the days when they turn it around. Hopefully that happens soon, but we'll have to talk about that, right? So let's talk a little bit about the pending free agents, right? I mean, we already talked about they're probably going to be $60 million over the cap, depending on where the cap comes in and, that sort of stuff. But they already have their starting linebacker, Josie Jewell. He's an unrestricted free agent. He's probably gone. Their kicker is an unrestricted free agent as well, who was pretty good this year. So they're going to have to either try and bring him back or going to have to address it some other way. You've got Mike Purcell. He's pretty much their starting defensive lineman. He's going to be gone. You've got PJ Locke. He became the starter and probably would remain the starter if he stuck around. So he's probably, they're going to try and probably bring him back. That's a starter. You got your fullback, Michael Burton. He's unrestricted free agent. Fabian Moreau, who was good at first and then got really bad. I mean, they needed to address that anyway, but he's the starter. He's gone. Adam Troutman is an unrestricted free agent. Starting tight end, who's gone. They've got to address that. And then their center, Lloyd Cushenberry, is an unrestricted free agent. So that's before you even start to manipulate the cap in any way, before you start to release players, before you start to make other moves to get the cap in a manageable situation. So that's already 6-7 starters that are gone. That's rough to try and replace. Now, I think Josie Jewell can be replaced by Drew Sanders, hopefully. You got some young cornerbacks. Hopefully, Riley Moss can kind of step into that role. You drafted Forsyth in last year's draft as a center. Maybe he can step in and replace Cushenberry. So there's some young players, but then you have to think about you've got six draft picks. That's not a lot to work with coming up. So they're going to have to make some moves. Now, we'll talk about those moves in a second. But I'm going to grab Pearl Heater coming in saying good morning. Good morning, Pearl. Thank you so much for being here. And we've got Nick Klinger coming in. Good morning, bro. Looking at next year's opponents, can you see more wins? I'm not so sure. Yeah, I'm going to talk about that too. I think, and like I said on Mile High Insiders, I think they're going to take a step back next year. I think they're probably going to have less wins than 8 because they're going to be young, inexperienced. And maybe the coaching job will be so good, and maybe they'll luck out and grab a great quarterback somehow, and things will get better. But from my perspective, looking at it right now, I think they're going to take a step back. So it's going to be a little bit more of a rough season. And David Youngkin's coming in, and saw this morning too. Jared Mayo is the new coach already for the New England Patriots. Didn't take long, and I guess it was written into his contract that he would be the successor, which that's pretty interesting that did it. So that's why it was so quick, and they didn't need to satisfy the Rooney Rule or anything like that. So it was that was fast. That was the first shoe to drop already. And I think there's still coaches that, not head coaches, but other coordinators that might still be let go and things like that. So that was quick with the Patriots, and they're going to start their offseason right away. And then talking about staff changes, I'm not sure who Facebook user is, but thank you for coming in from Facebook and asking this question, saying, good morning, Thomas. Do you see any staff changes coming to Coach Peyton's staff? And do you think he brings in his personnel? Yeah, I think they are contemplating the offensive and defensive coordinator more so. I think, Jeremy Shawn said this really early last year that Dennis Allen, if he gets let go, may be brought in as the defensive coordinator. I think they have to make some changes. I don't like what the defense put out there. I know there's a talent gap on this team, but they had a rough go. They had a couple good, they had some good games there in the middle, but for the most part, it was a pretty rough go on defense. I think they're going to contemplate Vance Joseph's future for sure. I think they're happy with a lot of the younger coaches, the assistant coaches. I think they were pretty happy with them. Special teams is pretty solid. I think you've got some young assistants on defense and offense that were pretty good. So I think it's just the top two that Sean Payton may be contemplating. But I think he still sticks around with Lombardi with Lombardi because they're old buddies and old coaching mates, and I think I think he'll probably stick with him. But I think Vance Joseph's the big question, and yeah, I don't know. We'll see, but I think it's Vance Joseph is the one that they're really considering. Keith Brugman's coming in saying, to everyone who thinks a Russ cap hit isn't that bad, just take the 85 million cap hit next year. Brutal. Yeah, 85 million. They can't take 85 million. That would, they would be so far over the cap. I don't know how they would get under the cap. They're going to have to spread it out into 2 seasons. They have to. 2025, they have more cap space to work with, so it won't be as big of a hit. But this year, the 37 million is a big hit. 85 million, I'm looking at how they can get under the cap with a 37 million dead cap hit from Russ. I don't even know how they would do it with an 85 million cap hit. That's a big dead cap hit. And then, it's not just a cap hit. It means you have a bunch of money tied up in a player that's no longer with your team, no longer able to help your team at all. And, you're going to have to take the scraps of quarterbacks if you want to bring one in for free agency, because you'll have so much tied up in the quarterback position. And David Youngkin's jumping in with the talk about Vance Joseph, saying, when I say Vance Joseph has to go, people have a problem with that. You can't be dominant one week and weak as heck the next week. Yeah, it's true. I mean, the defense was very inconsistent, but here's my problem with Vance Joseph. It wasn't just that the defense was bad. It was bad in the wrong ways at times, right? It was a lot of mental errors, a lot of mental mistakes. It was the calls in certain games that just seemed to not fit with how they should have been calling that game. That's what concerns me the most. It was how he went about game day coaching. Now, I understand that Vance Joseph is a really good coach when it comes to, teaching and practicing, but he seemed a lot of times to really kind of drop the ball during the game, and that's what concerns me the most. I think that the defensive and offensive coordinators, in this situation, Sean Payton was really the play caller, but during the game, calling the correct plays and putting your players in position during the game is very, very important for a coordinator, and I think he missed out on that. So I'm with you, David. He was a problem, and I can't overlook the stretch that he had where the defense played well, but I also can't overlook the first part of the season and the back end of the season. A lot more games where they just didn't play very well. So, all right. So here's how the Broncos can really get under the cap without moving a bunch of money down the road. So you're gonna see Tim Patrick probably released. Maybe he'll come back on a cheap contract. I don't know. He hasn't been, on the field for the last couple of years. He's getting a little older. That's not a surprise, but that's going to free up, I think, around 9 million in cap space. I also think that DJ Jones is probably going to be a cap casualty, and that's going to free up about 10 million. I like DJ Jones, but at this point I think he's kind of past his prime, so to speak, and they need that space. So I don't think they're going to get a trade for him, maybe, but definitely a release. So um, then after that, I think they're going to probably try and restructure Sutton. I think Cortland Sutton maybe a restructure candidate, and I think maybe Zach Allen as well. But I wouldn't restructure uh, like McGlinchey or even Ben Powers, because I don't think it's smart to have a player who underperformed from my perspective, especially for what he cost, to have a huge cap hit down the road. I mean, if they want to move on from them the sooner rather than later, you don't want that big cap hit down the road. So I would be very hesitant in restructuring players like that. Then you're still quite a bit over the cap, right? So then you're going to have to start to look at some trades. I think the top 3 candidates for trades are Jerry Jeudy. I think they're going to try and trade him right away. Then you've got Justin Simmons and Garrett Bowles. I think those last two players are trade candidates. I think that they won't trade Surtain unless they're absolutely desperate and have to. I don't think they're going to do it. But Garrett Bowles and Justin Simmons, they're older. They can help out a team that thinks they might be a contender. They really can, and they might be able to get something valuable for them. So, and that, Bowles trading him would add would take 16 million off the cap, and Simmons would 14 million. So if you make all of those moves that I just talked about, now you're about around 15 million under the cap. Now you have something to work with. Now you have some money to work with to bring in some players to fill those holes. But they're not going to be very active in free agency because they can't. They're and George Payton came out and said we're not going to be very active in free agency. I think they went out and spent way too much money early on and didn't get a very good return on their investment for the top 2 players that they went out to get. I think they made some good moves otherwise, but those top 2, McGlinchey and Powers, I don't think they got a very good return on their investment. James Hyatt's coming in saying, good morning, Thomas. Good morning, James. Glad to see you here. Thank you for being here. And also saying we need lots of help up front on defense. Yeah, the Broncos, I mean, even if they didn't have 2 players that they're going to have to either try to re-sign, which like Purcell, I don't think they're even going to try. He's an unrestricted free agent. And then, DJ Jones, they still needed help. I mean, I think that Mike Purcell had a few good games. I think he had some solid play, but overall, it wasn't great on the defensive line. I mean, Zach Allen's the one piece that you have, but other than that, you need to bring in some players, and you better hope that you get some good young players in the draft, because right now, with Purcell being gone and DJ Jones probably released, you've got Henningsen and Jonathan Harris as really your 2 other starters with Zach Allen, and that's not good enough, not even close. So they're gonna have to look at the draft to get a defensive line player, and they're probably gonna have to go out free agency and find one too. And hopefully it's that player's got some tread left on their tires. Michael Ronquillo's coming in saying, I think it would be time to move on from Russell Wilson and get ready to draft our own quarterback this year or next year. If we don't go that route, the first round of 2024 NFL draft. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, they're going to move on from Russell Wilson. The writing's on the wall. I think, the mix between Sean Payton and Russell Wilson just didn't work. And so you're not going to keep him around. He'll be sitting on the bench. He's not going to be playing. So I think he's gone. Even though they said, oh well, they haven't made the decision yet. I mean, the writing's on the wall. They're probably going to try and draft a quarterback. I don't know if they're going to get one in the first round this year. They've got a lot of holes to fill. My preference would be to try and fill the holes that you can fill on your roster this season. Hopefully, get a quarterback early next year. That's what I think. But if one happens to be there in striking distance and you can trade up that you really like, then do it. Then go for it. Keith Brugman's coming back in with Facebook stars. Thank you for the support, Keith. Appreciate it. Saying, question, Thomas. A lot of people point to Matt Ryan, saying the Broncos can't take a larger cap hit. But would Ryan have made the Falcons team better playing for them? Uh, are you talking about later in his career after he I mean, Matt Ryan was a pretty solid quarterback for a lot of years, and he's fit pretty well in the offense that they were running. I don't. I mean, are you talking? I think you're talking about the dead cap hit that they had when they released him, and decided to go younger. At that point, Matt Ryan was kind of at the end of his career, so I don't fault him for that. Uh, I don't fault the team for trying to move on. I mean, Matt Ryan had kind of played out his career. It was a large cap hit, and the Falcons are struggling to get back to relevancy, and they just fired their head coach. So yeah, I mean, it's a bad situation either way. You take the cap hit and you try and move on. And I don't know. I'd have to look at the Falcons, what they had around them. I'm looking at the Broncos situation right now, and the cap hit plus the unrestricted free agents. That's a recipe for a tough time this offseason for sure. But thank you, Keith, for that question and coming in here this morning. Really, really do appreciate it. All right. We got Colin Wood coming in here asking about Jameis Winston. I get a lot of heat for saying this, but I'd like to see Jameis Winston back with Peyton. Um, I'm not really high on Jameis Winston. I think he had a couple good games in that 7-game stretch with Sean Payton that kind of made him look a lot better. But his touchdowns were up, his interceptions were down. But his touchdowns were driven by one game that had 5 touchdowns. That doesn't happen very often. It only happened one other time in Jameis Winston's career. But if you look at all the other metrics that Jameis Winston had under Sean Payton, they all were down. His yards per game, his completion rate, I think, was down. It wasn't as a wonderful picture as people try to paint it. He definitely improved his turnovers, and that was good. But do we really want Jameis Winston in a Sean Payton offense that he can't really execute as well as I don't know. I think I'd rather go with I'd rather spend the money elsewhere and go with if they're going to bring in somebody, bring in a rookie quarterback, see what they can do. I know that. I mean, if they stick with Jarrett Stidham, man, if Jarrett Stidham is the starting quarterback, it's going to be a rough season. I know that he went out and looked, had similar statistics to Russell Wilson, but is that really good enough? And that was only 2 games against one in really inferior opponent in the Chargers, and then they lost to the Raiders, who kind of whipped up on them. So he also took a lot of sacks, and we're talking about Russell Wilson taking a lot of sacks. Jarrett Stidham took 7 sacks in 2 games. That's a lot. So I don't know, man. I think the Broncos need to look to get younger everywhere on this roster, and at quarterback being one of them. So I think I don't know, man. I'm not big on Jameis Winston, and plus bringing in another quarterback right from free agency. Anyone that's going to help improve this team, like Kirk Cousins or anything like that, a better quarterback that kind of fits Sean Payton's system, is going to cost some money, right? So you're going to have so much money in cap tied up in the quarterback position, in dead cap, and Jarrett Stidham, and then another quarterback. That's going to be a lot of money, and it's going to be hard to make any moves to really improve this team for the future. So again, trade some players, stockpile some picks for this draft. Hopefully they hit on their first rounder and get some good middle rounders as well. Get lucky and hit on some really good middle rounders. That's where they have to go. I mean, I don't think they're going to be able to make many moves at all, and especially at quarterback. All right. Let's see what else we've got in the draft. Nick Klingers, what about Ryan Tannehill? Again, it's one of those things where, I mean, I think Tannehill would be a pretty decent quarterback in Sean Payton's offense, but again, you're going to tie up a lot of money because he's not going to come that cheap. So you're still looking at these players, and you've got so many holes to fill. Like, it's going to be hard to hard to sell a new quarterback as well, for with the money they have. And man, I don't know. I would take Tannehill if he was kind of a bridge to the next thing. But again, the situation at quarterback is kind of bleak right now. That's all I've got to say. It's bleak for the Broncos until they can find a young quarterback. And Lawrence Rivera is coming in saying, "Good morning, Broncos fan. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Appreciate you being here, Lawrence." And Michael Ronquillo's coming back in saying, "Jerry Jeudy, Justin Simmons, and Garrett Bowles are trade candidates for the Broncos." Yeah, that's exactly right. Those are the three on my list that are probably the only players that they have the ability to really trade that gives them help in the salary cap and can potentially improve the team. Patrick Surtain too, trading him will give you help in the draft, but it doesn't necessarily improve your team. That's what I'm saying. You can't get rid of one of the best players at a premium position in order to hope to get a quarterback when you got other moves that you can make. And James Hyde's coming in to say, "Just don't draft Paxton Lynch 2.0." Yeah, I mean, that was a disaster. I said that they when Brock Osweiler decided to leave the Broncos and go to the Texans, really put the Broncos in a major bind. John Elway felt like he had to draft Paxton Lynch, and and then that kind of pushed Kubiak into saying, "You know what, I don't really want to, risk my health for a Paxton Lynch led team," and then he ended up leaving the next season. It just, man, that was rough, that Paxton Lynch. So yeah, they've got to find a good one. Uh, I know people point to, Tom Brady was drafted in the 6th round, so you can find somebody. Yeah, you can find somebody in the later rounds, but it is extremely hard. People remember these draft successes, but they don't think about all of the draft failures in those rounds that didn't pan out. So it's a tough one. You can get lucky, and maybe they will. Hopefully, they will get lucky. But really, drafting that impact player, especially at quarterback, it's usually in those top early picks, and then even those don't pan out. And Keith Brugman's coming in. Ben DiNucci, League MVP 2024. That's the type of thing we could use to get on the right side of all these this cat mess. Yeah, I mean, that would be awesome if he could really pan out and be a really good player, and that would be amazing. It'd be an amazing story. We'll keep our fingers crossed for that one. But yeah, I think of the quarterbacks that are on the team right now, I think it's Stidham is who Peyton favors. But then you have to think about it. He comes up unrestricted free agent after next year. So even if he plays okay, then you've got to figure out how you manage that situation. But I don't expect him to be a very good quarterback, and I don't expect them to stick with him long term. I think he's maybe the starter next year until they can find a young quarterback to take over for sure. And we've got Jeremy Shawn is coming in, and he's Jeremy says Penix, Nix, or McCarthy would all be better than what we've had since Manning. Well, I mean, that's to be determined. I think that they all have some questions about their game. They also have some good qualities about their game. But you never know until they're out there playing on the field. And some of these early quarterbacks that have been drafted in the past, people thought they would pan out, and then they didn't. And a lot of it has to do, they have. For me, if you're getting one of those three, they better have a good work ethic, right? I mean, they all have their talents. They better have their work ethic, a solid work ethic, because someone like Paxton Lynch didn't care to put the time in, right? And Johnny Manziel, another early round, he didn't care to put the time in, and they failed, right? So I would say if any of those three guys, they have a good work ethic, okay, take a shot at them. But if you have any concerns about whether or not they're going to put the effort in to become a good starter in the league, then don't even go there. That's what I'm saying. But some of those guys fit in Sean Payton, right? Fit with Sean Payton's offense, I think. But they all have holes in their game as well. So we'll see what happens. I think one of them might be, maybe two might be available when the Broncos draft. They may not have to trade up to get one of those three. So if Sean Payton falls in love with one of them through the draft process, they may not have to move up at all to get one. But there are some quarterback needy teams out there, so you never know how it's going to go for sure. But we got Kevin here with his fingers crossed, wanting Bo Nix out of Oregon. Yeah, I mean he really had a resurrection of his career, and really, he struggled early on, and they went to Oregon. But the thing about Oregon's offense, right? There's not a lot of complexity to it, right? And also, I believe they have other coaches reading the defense and holding up signs. You're reading the coverage and holding up signs, so he doesn't even have to read the defense. So those things have to be worked out, right? He has to be able to do that on his own in the NFL. Can't be holding up signs telling what the coverage is. So there's some things that have to be worked through with Bo Nix and all of them. I mean, Penix's injury situation, that's got to be really gone over heavily, because that's another reason why a lot of players fail. They get injured and they don't make it. And Michael Ronquillo is coming in saying Bo Nix has his former teammate at Oregon rookie Alex Forsyth on the roster. That's the QB that would fit in Sean Payton's offense. Yeah, I mean that's there's a connection there, and maybe that Alex Forsyth will put in a plug or two for Bo Nix, but I don't know how much sway that has. If he was the starter, like if he took over as a starter and was a good player, then maybe they'd think about him. But he's, he didn't get much playing time, and he's got to prove himself too. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting offseason, and it's going to be an interesting draft, to say the least. Scott Dillon's coming in saying you put Penix behind this O-line and he's going to stay hurt. Well, I mean, it depends. I mean, it depends on what you look at. I think there was some struggles from this O-line for sure. I still think McGlinchey's the weakest link. But you're going to have to make some. They're probably not going to bring Cushenberry back. I think his cap hit might be too much. They're probably going to let him walk and go with the younger center in Forsyth. And then you got to come up with money for Miners as well soon. So, maybe Miners is a player that walks. I don't know, but you're going to have some changes on the offensive line. I think the Broncos need to address left tackle for the future in this draft, and maybe in the first round. Maybe address the first round, then, because you're going to probably see a Bulls trade. So they're going to have to. The offensive line is going to look a little bit different next season for sure. And then we got Nick Klinger coming in saying, sorry to bug you. You don't bug me. I mean, that's what this show's for, to have a conversation about Broncos and kick things back and forth, whether you agree with me or not. So we're still going to have the discussion. Sorry to bug you about, what about a trade for Justin Fields? Thanks for making work enjoyable. Well, I appreciate that. I'm glad that you're enjoying the show. Justin Fields, I don't know. I don't know if they should trade for him. I mean, Justin Fields has some good qualities, but I think the team would be frustrated with him as well, just like they were frustrated with Russell Wilson and any other quarterback that we've seen come out onto the field. So I don't know if it's worth trading for Justin Fields. I don't know if the Bears want to trade him. He really kind of came on towards the end of the season, but I think the Broncos really should take a couple swings at quarterback in the draft the next couple of years and hope they can find one on their own. All right. I am going to check Facebook to make sure I am seeing all the Facebook stars. I think I am, but of course, Michael Ronquillo is always giving support to the show. So thank you very much. Saying great show today, Thomas, on Legends of Mile High. Go Broncos. Thank you for that, Michael. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. And really, thanks for the conversation this morning. The Broncos situation looks bleak. There's no near-term future looks kind of bleak with the salary cap issues, the unrestricted free agents, lack of draft capital. So it's going to be an interesting offseason. I really hope that they make some good moves. I hope that they get some luck in the draft and they bring in some good players to get younger and prepare for the future. But yeah, I think next season man, it might be a little bit hard for fans to watch just based on what I'm seeing now. But that could change. That could change over this offseason. So, but anyway, thank you very much for being here today to discuss this with me. Appreciate it. Don't forget to tune in to the other shows. You've got Orange and Blue View on Saturday now. I've stepped away from that show, but Dylan Von Arx is stepping in. So it's going to be Dylan and Ron. Check that out. See how that goes. It's going to be, a little bit different with a different co-host, but it should be fun. So definitely check that out. But so thank you very much. Have a great day, Broncos fans, and we will see you on Wednesday for Mile High Insiders with myself and Luke Patterson. Thank you very much.